They just dumped a ton of money in to try to fix the background check, clear up all these records, and really what they did is they did the public a huge disservice, associated a bunch of records that did not need to be associated with each other, and has caused a tremendous amount of erroneous denials. I saw a number that it was like 90+% of denials are completely erroneous. We are the Armed Attorneys. Today we're answering your questions. These are questions we've received in the comments section. We love this stuff. If you have questions, things about what we've talked about, completely off the wall scenarios, feel free to leave them in the comments section down below. If you see another person's question, you like it, give it a thumbs up. That helps the good ones filter to the top. This is where we source most of these things. But we're talking today about, changing an SBR into a rifle and back. Is that all right? Some federal gun-free zone stuff. Non-resident licenses, how those two things relate to each other. Talking about, state of Texas is looking to decriminalize short-barreled rifles. What would that mean, and what would it happen if, something like that passed in your state, and so much more. But before we begin, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting that like button. All right, Leslie, you're on the hot seat for a bunch of questions.
Awesome, I'm ready.
All right, we'll start with this one. 8 in guy 1948. How do you go about checking other states' carry laws?
Yeah, that's a great question. So anytime you're going to travel outside of the state that you live in, every state in America has different gun laws. Some have great gun laws and some have awful gun laws. So you always want to make sure that you know the state's laws that you're going to travel to, because believe it or not, going to another state and saying, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not from here, I didn't realize that I couldn't have a gun, isn't going to go well with the police. They're going to say, well, we don't care that you aren't from here and you don't know what the law is. It's your job to know what the law is. So, to be honest, I think a great way or great place to start is Google. Google, say you live in California and you're traveling to, I don't know, Wyoming, Google Wyoming gun laws, and you're probably going to get a list of different websites. There's some good websites. Handgunlaw.com has some good information.
Yeah, .us. Yeah, those guys are great.
Mm-hmm. And look and see, can I carry in a bar? Can I even have a gun there to start with? That's the first question you should answer. Does the state have reciprocity with my state? If I have a license, permit, what have you, whatever your state calls it, to carry in one state, does it have reciprocity with the state that I'm going to? That's important. Do I have to have a license to carry in whatever state I'm traveling to? So Texas, for example, has constitutional carries. There's a lot of people now who don't have to have a license to carry in the state of Texas to carry, and that's great. But if they travel to other states, sometimes those states still require a license to carry, or some states have constitutional carry, but not for outsiders, only for their residents. So it's very important to check what the gun laws are in that specific state. And ultimately, the answer is you need to talk to an attorney in that state and make sure that you understand what the specific laws are before you travel.
Yeah, poor Vermonterans.
Yeah.
Is that what they call them? They don't get licenses or permit to carry. Their state has had constitutional carry since the very beginning. But really, that's what it comes down to. For kind of simple things, I'd say, depending on the degree of complexity, if it's something real simple like neighboring state, reciprocity, I'm sure the internet is fine. If you have kind of a nuanced issue about maybe there's a long list of prohibited weapons, maybe there's magazine capacity bans, things like that, or self-defense laws especially, I would not trust internet lawyers and forums about that kind of stuff. I would go to the source, speak to an attorney.
Okay, so next question we have is Matthew Starling 5547, and it says, just for the information, could you talk about going from pistol to rifle or SBR and back and forth? Essentially, can you make a pistol into a rifle, SBR, and going back and forth?
Yeah, the two that I think are most clear, we'll start with these. If you have a SBR, transforming it into a rifle, no problem whatsoever. And transforming it back to an SBR from the rifle configuration, you're not going to run into any issues. The issues you start to run into is, all right, this thing started as a rifle, becoming a short-barreled rifle. All right, are you going to run into any problems there? Not if you get permission from the ATF. You submit an application to build an NFA item, and then you pay your tax, and the ATF says, hey, okay, well now you can transform it into a short-barreled rifle. The pistols, I guess the only thing that comes up, you would want to do this, talking about a braced AR pistol, you'd want to do this thing in stages such that you aren't inadvertently building a short-barreled rifle. You got your brace on it, and you put a stock on it. In the interim, you don't continue to put on a barrel or whatever, I'd have it disassembled, reassembled. I mean, we're going to get technical. There's got to be no ATF agent kicking your door down while you're assembling this thing. But, making sure you're complying with not being in possession of an unregistered short-barreled rifle. That's the whole thing that we want to avoid under all of these different scenarios.
Yep.
All right, next one to you. All right, this is Jamie Wheeler, 7312. On the resident non-resident license discussion, doesn't the federal gun-free zones law require a license from the state where the school is located to carry in the school zone? All right, I'm going to cut it off there, but that is a fantastic question, and it comes up every now and then.
It does, yeah, and it is very important, and you're right, yeah. So what the federal law says is that you cannot go within 1,000 feet of a school with a firearm under federal law.
General rule.
Yes, that's the general rule. There is an exception to that rule if you have a license to carry issued to you from the state that you are in. So, for example, if you are in Florida and you have a license or permit to carry issued to you from the state of Florida, then you could go within 1,000 feet of that school under federal law. Check the state laws, check what their local laws are, but under federal law, that would be the exception. But yes, you do have to have a license from the state that you are in.
Yeah. By another example, if I had my Florida license and I was within 1,000 feet of the grounds of a Texas school zone, hey, guess what? That federal exception wouldn't apply. And there's other exceptions to it. There's a ton of exceptions to that, the federal gun-free school zones law. But just talking about licenses, it's worth illustrating. The license or permit has to be issued by the state in which the gun-free school zone is located in order to qualify for that exception.
And I think another interesting point on that is constitutional carry. Texas is constitutional carry. There's a lot of other states that are constitutional carry. If you're constitutionally carrying, you can't go within 1,000 feet of a school. So people always ask kind of what are the benefits of having a license to carry versus carrying under constitutional carry. That would be one of them, is the federal exception to going within 1,000 feet of a school. The next question we have is at Keith McCrae 7621. It says, whenever I buy a new gun, I always get delayed, never denied. How do I find out what causes this?
All right, so a little bit of background. Every time that an FFL is submitting another reason to get a license or permit to carry by your home state, maybe it qualifies as a substitute to the next check, but anytime the federal firearms license dealer, the gun store, is submitting a request for a background check through NICS, they get this thing called an NTN, which is a transaction number essentially associated with the transfer. And there's three responses that the FBI can provide in response. Proceed means good to go with the transfer. Delay, which means, hey, we need a few days to investigate this. Maybe we'll change our status from proceed or deny. And then there's deny, which means the transfer would be prohibited. Now, if the FFL doesn't get any update from the FBI after 3 days, they have to give the transfer. The transfer is okay to go. A lot of FFL still won't do it unless they get a proceed from the FBI. Just they make that as a matter of policy. That's their discretion. That's a conversation for another time. But these delays, all right, I would say, and delays and denies, you treat these two things a little bit differently. A denial, there's really three ways about clearing this up. First, you take your NTN, you go to the FBI, you request the reason for the denial. I mean, there's a million reasons why people could be denied a firearms transaction. I don't want you to guess. Get the actual reason from the FBI. All right, so you have the reason in hand. There's a lot of different paths you can go down. There's a firearms-related challenge, which is saying, hey, I just want to challenge this specific denial. There's obtaining a UPIN, unique personal identification number, which is like a social security number for transacting in firearms, which totally will avoid all of these, assuming that you're qualified. And then this is the sneaky one that I don't think a lot of people know about, but it's worth checking out, called a FBI Identity History Check Summary Challenge.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. So, and that one is probably the sneakiest, and I say sneakiest, but the fastest way to resolve these things, because doing a firearms-related challenge, UPIN, can take months and months and months, whereas this Identity History Check Summary Challenge can go a little bit faster. And so you get your reason from the FBI. Let's say it's completely erroneous. They say, hey, Richard, you're convicted of a murder in 1950 in New York. Well, I can tell you that probably wasn't me.
Probably not.
But what it means is, all right, if I go and pull my FBI background check, if that appears on it, then I can challenge my background check with the FBI. It's very similar to obtaining a UPIN, fingerprints, all these things. They find out, all right, this record is being wrongfully associated with you. And that process goes very fast because they're not just focused on guns. They're focused on all kinds of things with folks in their background checks. So those get resolved very quickly. If you see something erroneous the FBI says, hey, you were denied because something erroneous, I would consider going down that route just to get it resolved faster. If it's something where the disposition, let's say you got charged with a crime, but it was dismissed, or let's say you were acquitted, but maybe the court didn't update all the information. And I'll say that's the most common reason for denials. That's the next category we'll go into. The path that I see for fixing this is you usually have to go back to the court, wherever this arrest took place. Make sure they have submitted the correct information to the FBI, because I'll say the number one reason for denials are they just have incomplete records and they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. So a lot of people get really worried about why they might be delayed or denied, and they think that, there's something in their criminal history that they don't remember, or they did something they don't remember. It's very common that people have the same name. So it's very easy that maybe the government, I know there's multiple Richard Hayeses. So, maybe there's someone who has your same name, and that's all you have to get cleared up, is that you are not this person, you're this person.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many. I've had more than one Juan Lopez client who's gotten a denial erroneously, because, hey, guess what? It's like John Doe, right, in Texas. But they did this in this past back, I want to say it was in 2018, the Fix Nix Act. They just dumped a ton of money in to try to fix the background check, clear up all these records. And really what they did is they did the public a huge disservice, associated a bunch of records that did not need to be associated with each other, and has caused a tremendous amount of erroneous denials. I saw a number that it was like 90+% of denials are completely erroneous. I think that came out of Gun Owners of America. It might even be a higher number than that, but don't worry. There is theoretically a remedy in place, and it's something that if you're really concerned about it, you could talk to an attorney about it.
And like Richard said earlier, if this is something that you keep having happen and you're in a state that does have a license to carry option, and that they do allow that in lieu of a background check like they do in Texas, that's also a really quick way to do it as well. Here in Texas, go get your license to carry. When you go to buy a gun, you give them that. They don't do the background check, and you're out the door in 30 minutes.
Awesome. All right. This one is from Live Fandith. Have you seen the YouTube ads where they imply you can get a new federal concealed carry license and state outright that they'll get you a CCL from the comfort of your own home that will let you carry nationwide?
Yep, I have seen those, and I've gotten multiple calls about it as well. And it's such a scam, and it's really sad because I think people are falling for it, unfortunately. There is no nationwide license to carry. There's no federal license to carry. You can get a state-by-state license to carry, and obviously those licenses have reciprocity with other states. Some states have reciprocity with more states. Other states have reciprocity with less states.
Yeah, for a while there, I can't remember what state it was, maybe Utah, where you could do the training online. It only took a couple of hours. Maybe they've changed their training requirements because I don't see them as much. But there are real online licenses out there. Yes, those exist. But like I saw one the other day that was basically like, federal carry law, 50 states, and it was just the person's name printed on what looked like a Bill of Rights with the Second Amendment on the other side. And it's like, okay, yeah, I get it. Very sneakily in like red font, 8-point corners, like this is a novelty. Right. It's like you're gonna get people arrested when you do stuff like that.
Which is sad.
All right, last one. We have Bear Claw AK-47. I see they're here in Texas. They are voting on deregulating short-barreled rifles. What exactly does this mean? They still fall under the NFA. Would this actually change anything? Well, great question.
Yeah, it is. So it would change one thing, and that the state authorities could not enforce it. But ultimately, no. If you're going to have an SBR, you're still going to have a tax stamp. It's still going to be governed by the National Firearms Act. All of that would still apply. So, I could see people potentially getting in some trouble with the feds if you end up having an SBR and you don't have a tax stamp for it and you take it to a gun range. Or another thing I see happen, which people don't believe me on, but they actually do monitor social media. So if you're posting videos of you with your illegal SBR on social media, the feds do monitor that. And I've had people who end up getting arrested for that.
Yeah, the other thing I'd add to it is, and what really prompted all this was, all right, depending on what direction the wind is blowing in DC, we have braces being considered stocks. We have, different items that once the government blessed, no longer blessed. And so we had a lot of different state agencies, local police officers come into contact with like a brace pistol and say, aha, you're in possession of a short barrel rifle and you're breaking the law. Well, that would go away, right? Sure. But what happens oftentimes, let's say they bust somebody for one crime. If there's a federal crime implicated, they'll refer it to the Department of Justice. Most of the time, the DOJ, I'll say, just depends, but they don't care because most of the time the local cops don't do a good enough investigation. You know,
Sure.
they really like to have a very clean investigation, buttoned up very tight. But, you know, state authorities, we don't need Texas police officers enforcing federal gun laws.
I definitely agree with that. I
Yeah.
definitely do, because I don't think they have enough training on what is and what is not an SBR.
Yeah, especially with braces.
Right.
There's other rearward attachments that aren't stocks. This comes up over and over. But we hope you enjoy this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video. And don't forget to leave your questions and comments in the section down below. And until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.